Okay. Thank you everyone for joining. So like the topic for today's session is getting started with Power BI Desktop. So to start off with a little introduction, my name is Akshata Revankar. I'm currently a data architect at McKinsey Co. I've been in the IT space for about 17 years, but very specifically in that about 9 years, 8 to 9 years, I've been in the data reporting and analytics space. And within that, like I've been working a lot in Azure and Power BI, and with Azure, I've done a couple of certifications. And the best way to reach me is on LinkedIn. Okay. So again, first of all, thank you to Data TGIF team, which is managed by Kai. Thank you for giving me this platform. And then my mentor, Nicola, who on some days had to stay up late night to help me with my presentation due to our time zone differences. So definitely a big thank you there. Okay. So getting to the agenda for today, first of all, I'll give a quick introduction to Power BI and Power BI Desktop itself. Then we'll do a quick working session or a demo with building one Power BI report, and we'll leave some time at the end for some questions. Okay. So when we talk about Power BI umbrella, it's huge. There's several components under it because often these terms get mixed up and people are wondering, where do I create my report? Where do I publish my report? What else can I do with this? So first of all, let's look. I mean, there is something called as Power BI Desktop. That is a tool that you install on your machine, and it is free to download and use. And that's what today's session is going to be about. And this is where it's you actually build your report. Any report building happens on Power BI Desktop. And from here, you'll be publishing it. So when I say publish, it goes to Power BI Service. Power BI Service is a SaaS offering where you would, whatever report is created in Power BI Desktop, you publish it, and it goes to Power BI Service. Power BI Service also has capabilities to create a report, edit report, and but there are some limitations. Some of the features which are available in Power BI Desktop may not be available in Power BI Service. Next comes Power BI App. So what happens is once you create a report on desktop, you publish it on Service. Service gives you another additional feature called dashboard. You can pull in tiles from your different reports and create one nice landing page for your dashboard or whatever reporting app you're creating. So when you bundle your dashboard, your underlying reports all together, you can publish it as something in like an app store. That's what Power BI App Store is. So you can bundle your app and publish it. Microsoft and several other, there are publicly published apps, like even this COVID report is a publicly published app. You can download it from there as a template. If you can connect it to a different data source if you want, if your data model matches, or you can download the whole report with the data and use it. Next is Power BI mobile app. This is like any other regular app that you download on your phone, Android, iOS, and then whatever report is published on desktop or service, it gives you an ability to watch it on your mobile phone. Power BI Desktop also has a feature to restructure your reporting components or like, your visual cards in a format that would be best for mobile viewing. And the last one is Power BI Report Builder. This is nothing but the old SSRS offering, SQL Server Reporting Services. So you can build long paginated reports, like whether you're doing an Excel download or a PDF download, where you have rows and rows of transactional report, which is not good for a dashboard viewing. You can always build a report that will read the data source and create paginated reports for you. So who uses Power BI? Very often it's the data analyst who probably more of a low code experience. They are quick, they have the data, and they have to create visualizations to analyze their data, or BI professionals as we call them. And the second group is like report developers. That's the space where I grew in, wherein you have business teams. They say, I have so and so data. We want reports to be built, because these could be very technical, extensive reports. That's where some technical help would be required, and that's where the report developer space comes into picture. So why do we use Power BI? Right? The first 2 points are how Microsoft defines this, which I really like, is you connect to your data, you transform your data, and you visualize it. So that's connect, transform, and visualize. And the second one is where they say, if you have your data, Power BI helps you get the insights from your data. When you build visuals, you get insights. And based on those insights, you can take action. Like, very often when you say, how is my sales trending? And what are impacting my sales? You slice and dice that. And based on that, you can take actions like which product do you want to sell more, which can increase your revenue or sales. Like I mentioned before, Power BI Desktop is free to download and use. Right. So you might be wondering what's the catch. So that's where it comes when you compare it to Power BI service, which gives you ability to build reports, but with not the full functionality. Power BI service comes with a subscription. There are several different forms of subscription, and then based on, because it's a SaaS offering, um, so there are different subscriptions that you may want to use, and some features are there. Like there is the highest offering is premium capacity. So Power BI service is where the pay model comes into picture, where you take a subscription, and if you want to share your report with several users, it's more of just for viewing. You would need a Power BI subscription. So one workaround that is, let's say you are just trying out Power BI to see how it works. Whatever PBIX file that you, because when you create a Power BI report, the extension it gets saved with is .pbix. You can give this PBIX to any other team member or whoever you want to share the report with, provided they have access to the data source. They should be able to connect to the data source and be able to view the data. And sometimes if the data is stored with your Power BI report, they can as well look at that. So yeah, sharing PBIX is a kind of a workaround if you don't have Power BI service and if you're still trying it out. One good fact, like, several of Power BI enthusiasts or anyone from Power BI space shares is the Magic Quadrant from Gartner, which shows Microsoft as a leader in the business intelligence platform. So definitely that's one great reason to why to learn Power BI. Okay, so coming on to our main topic for today, that's Power BI Desktop. So first of all, let's look at, what can it do, some of the basic features. Power BI, when I say get data, it can help you connect to any of the different data sources. Power BI keeps adding data sources, and you will often see a beta version. We look at that during the demo. You can do a quick data profiling, quickly see my null columns, error data, and what are the distribution of values. There is data profiling capability, transform your data, and that's doing some manipulation, some kind of ETL. Data modeling, you can build dimensions once, let's say you have got flattened fact tables or some data that is very flattened out. You can definitely use Power BI to do quick data modeling as well. Ideally, it's recommended that you have your star schema, whatever, back in the data warehouse itself. But if that's not an option, Power BI lets you do your data modeling. And the last two are visualize the data. You can quickly create visual cards for your data and also add report filters to slice and dice it. Some of the advanced features which we'll not be covering today, because each one of them, they're on their own, are like worth 2-3 sessions or several sessions. Hierarchy is you can build data like dimensions which need hierarchy, like you have employee, manager, or even your date, month, day, year. So that kind of hierarchy. Next one is a very, very important topic, like measures. We call it DAX or data analysis expression. This is more for creating functional slicing and dicing of your data, or if you need any functions in your reporting. So DAX is which is used. It helps you with dynamic filtering of your data. So let's say if you want to calculate some kind of percentages, so where you have a denominator, the data often the aggregated value often changes based on the denominator. So that's not something you can pre-compute and save in your database, because that won't give you the right value. So that's where DAX comes into picture. Parameters is what you can run your report based on a user input. Like sometimes people use it in different ways. Like for the M query, if you hear a parameter, it will mainly be to switch the data connection, prod, QA, dev. And sometimes there is also this option based on a user input you want to adjust. Like, what if I do only 50% of my sales? So what will my real sales revenue look like? So that's where you use parameters. Power Query M is or you might hear it as M language. That is another important space. And again, this is M language. So often people get confused between Power Query M and DAX. The good way to remember it is DAX is more on your report visual side for dynamic functions. And Power Query M is purely your data manipulation ETL side. When you load your data, you want to do some manipulation, which are more of canned work, not very dynamic, that goes into Power Query. So this is ETL and that is dynamic. Next is row-level security. You can very well control what data is shared with users based like row-level security. You can do that, and that also ties with your role-based access control RBAC. With both this, you can do a very strong functionality of controlling, when you have security requirements or data protection requirements, you can use these. Tab reports is different reporting tools do it differently. Like you can either create tab reports or long reports. Power BI gives you the option to create tab reports. You can have several pages of reports. We'll look at that when we do a demo. Okay, so in the demo, we'll quickly walk through the landscape or features of Power BI Desktop and our top 5 features on the Power Query editor, and then create one report. Okay, so let's look at Power BI Desktop. Right now I'm showing a built report so that we can quickly understand what the landscape looks like. So Power BI Desktop, like I mentioned, it's free to download and use. So once you download and you open, this is what your first landing page will look like. And once you build a report or whatever, it'll look like this. So to quickly show, I'll go in a clockwise fashion. So first we'll look at these 3 icons on the side. The first one is, it will be called as report. When you hover over it, this is where the actual canvas on where you start building your report. You put in your visuals and graphs and charts. The second one is a data view. So this is where you can quickly look at the data values. This is not really where you would be manipulating your data. That's Power Query Editor. We'll look at that in a bit, but this lets you look at your data values without really having to jump to Power Query Editor. And the last one is your data modeling view. This is where you can build, have your facts and dimensions. So a lot of times, if your data model back in the database is already built with keys, like foreign key, Power BI recognizes that and brings those in. You have an option to check, uncheck it. But yes, so this is what your data modeling, I have facts and dimensions. So if you see this one means and the star, it shows a one-to-many relation between the actor table and the film actor table. Okay, so this is our left-hand side panel. Going to the top panel. The top panel will often change based on which view you are in. So it gives you functions based on what is more makes sense for that page you are on. So very quickly, the first few are like get data. This is how you connect to your data sources. And then it will give you some quick links. The main one is get data. And when you click that, you will see some options to connect data. We will look at that when we start building a report. And then transform data is what opens the Power Query editor to manipulate the data. Refreshes to refresh. Once you have loaded your data and your data source has changed, you can click refresh to refresh it. And these are to create quick visuals. One thing to remember is in Power BI desktop or even in the service, you'll see the same functionality is provided in different places. So if I click new visual here versus using a visualization panel, both do the same thing. So most of the time we end up using this right-hand side panel. And this is just given over here. Like it's always good to remember that the same functionality is available in multiple places. Then you can create measures. Measures is where the DAX comes into picture. You want to create some quick formulas. Just like in Excel, you have the FX. So you create formulas of some division or any other. DAX is very extensive. Last one is when you want to publish your data to a Power BI service. So coming on to right-hand side, and again, as I keep changing the things on the top, you will see a few more options of, again, you'll see the measures repeat under modeling, and under insert, you'll have a few other functions like, adding text or buttons to your report. These are AI visuals, so it will change based on which view you're on. Okay, one thing that I do want to mention, which I may have forgotten, you can add themes to your report. So when I do click this, let's see. So this whole report color has changed. So this is a good way to see what my canvas will really look like when I publish. So everything that's in purple is the actual canvas when you publish your report up to Power BI service. And you can also customize themes. This works really like Power BI PowerPoint, where you can customize the theme and add your organization specific theme. Coming to mobile layout, this lets me structure my report good for a mobile viewing. So if I click this, it'll show me how I can pull and drag and drop the elements, how I want to place it. Okay. And a performance analyzer is used mainly to see once you have built a report and you see it performing slow. This helps you break it down whether your data loading itself is slow or your DAX measures are taking up time. It's a very good tool. Once you build more and more reports, you'll see yourself using those. Sync filters is generally if you have multiple pages, you want to sync the filters across those pages, you would use the sync slicers. Bookmark is generally, if you want to create bookmarks for your report, this is also a very widely used feature. So let's see, I think I have covered pretty much. So manage roles, view roles, this is where your role-based, role level security or role-based access control can be controlled from. I think with that, yeah, these are again visuals we have covered. The top panel coming on to the right-hand side. These are the filters on your report. So if I click a visual, I can choose to have filters based on whatever elements I've pulled into this report or fields. I can add filters to that, like whether I want to filter it by date or the amount. So that's there. And there is a control that whether it's just for this visual, I can control the filters on a visual for the whole page or on all pages. So if you see down at the bottom, I can add multiple pages to my report. So you will have filters that can be controlled across all reports. Then visualizations, this is again extensively used panel. This is where you choose to make your visual. So right now this looks like a line graph. I can quickly change it to a bar graph, though it may not make sense there, but yeah. So that's how what you can use to create the change your visuals and the visual cards. Down below it is the first one is the fields and what access you choose, how you control the values on your graph. The second part is the visual formatting or how it will look, like the title of what font and what I need, what is the x-axis label, y and x-axis label, any kind of formatting that you want to do, a tooltip that you want to give, everything that's controlled here. The last one is called as analytics. So this one is mainly, it doesn't come with all the visuals. So this particular graph has it. You can create a trend line or a constant line where generally often people like a max line, average line. And with every visual, it's different. For some visual, there may not be any options at all. So sometimes we tend to get confused. Oh, I just saw this for another graph. Why don't I see it? It's heavily based on what visual you have selected. So if I like select the donut chart, it really doesn't give me any functionality. And the last one is the fields. So this is where your all the data sources that you have pulled in will have the all the tables and columns that are pulled in will be shown over here. Okay. Then now let's look at Power Query, build a report. That's where we look at the Power Query editor. So now I have an empty canvas. Let's go ahead and connect to a data source. Okay, so like I said, there are several data sources, and like if it's hard to go through it, it's very easy. You can just type in here. It should filter that for you. So in my case, since I have connected to this database in the past, it won't give me a login credential screen, but in normal scenario, you would get a credential screen where you have to enter your user ID and password. There's also an option that if you want to pull the data based on a SQL query, you can do that. This is the option where I say include relationship columns. It will bring in the foreign key relationship between your tables. One important, let me get this data in and then I can show you something. One important thing about Power BI, which is not available in MySQL, there are some like SQL Server or Snowflake gives you that option, is something called as direct query or import. What direct query does is it is like a live connection to your data source. It's constantly sending, every time you slice and dice your data, it will send a live connection back to your data source and query it. Whereas import is wherein it brings in that data and saves the data as part of your Power BI or PBIX file. So that's the difference. And this option is available for a couple of data sources, and you will see that option as soon as you do a get data. Let me quickly pull in some of these data sources and we'll look at that as well. Okay. So we can either load data or transform data. If I do a load, it will just bring it directly into my Power BI desktop where we saw the fields on the side panel. And if I choose to do a transform data, that's where it opens the Power Query editor. Let me do a transform data. So while it's doing that, let me show you the direct query and import option because that's an important one to know. Okay, so this is where you see data connectivity mode. It is import or direct query. Import is it'll bring the data as part of your PBX. But in that scenario, don't get worried that if your data is 20 gig, 30 gig, will my PBX file be 30 gig? No. PBI, Power BI internally compresses the data as much as possible. So very recently, I worked with a data size of about 52 gig, but eventually when it compressed it as part of the report, it became about 700 MB. And again, but once you add visuals or any DAX functions, because these DAX and measures get saved as part of your Power BI, that will further increase the memory. So that is sometimes people try to evaluate, do I need all these over here? And sometimes people work with options of separating the data set and Power BI report. Okay, so let's go back to, yeah. So if you notice, this is, one second, let me, okay. So Power Query Editor is what opens when I click transform data, or if I do transform from the get data screen, it will open up another interface. So this is what Power Query Editor is, and where you do the ETL or manipulation of your data. So on the left hand side, I can quickly see all my data elements, and then let me turn this off so that I can, okay. So this is a quick view of my data. And then since I've pulled in the table relationships, it automatically identifies that actor table is connects with film actor. And if I click these two arrows, what it's really going to do is expand the film actor table and bring in all the columns of the film actor table over here. So it kind of creates a flattened view, which sometimes you may need or you may not need. But since my data is a really good star structure, I really don't need to do that. But there are some scenarios where you might want to have a flattened table. Okay, and then very quickly we'll look at some of the features that are commonly used over here. One is your query panel. This is where you'll see every data source that you have pulled in. Advanced editor is where you can look at what your M query looks like. So this shows what my data source is, and if some people are very proficient with M query, they can write M query there instead of trying to do click and drag and drop things over here. You can choose remove columns, keep rows. This is to clean up your data, or split column based on if you have a column where, you know, let's say your country and city and state are mashed up in one column, and if they are separated by a comma, you can use split column and separate it out. Quickly change the data type. You can also click these. So this on the top box shows you the data type. So this is string. I can click here and choose to change it. Merge and append queries is you can merge data source, like if you have Excel files as sales report, which have the same structure but different Excel files, you can choose to merge them. Merge is one below the other, whereas append is one next to each other. Merge is one next to each other, append is one below the other, right? Where you keep appending data, and merge is you have your data over here and you're appending columns, merging. So this would be more of a merge. Okay, let's look at transform. We covered some of these. Then you can create custom columns. We'll be doing one of those examples. When I spoke about data profiling, this is definitely very helpful, is column quality. It tells you how many valid values or error values you have, how many are empty, if there are some null rows you want to identify. Column distribution, it shows you how many different values are there, what is the value of distribution. And to get further insight into what the distribution exactly looks like, you can choose column profile. So it'll show me that I have about 4 values for Penelope, then another 4 values for Julia and Kenneth. So that way it shows me the distribution and total count of the rows. Currently it does the profiling on the top first 100 rows, 1000 rows. I can choose to change it to do it on the entire data set. Okay, so let's quickly add a column. So I go to my rental data. So I have a return date column over here, a rental date column over here. So I'll be adding a day of the week column, which we can use in a report later. So I click this column, go to add column. I do a custom function. Let's call this rental day of week. And then over here, it prompts you for what you want to add. So I go for date, day of week name, and then I select my rental date. I close this. So it checks for your syntax error. It looks okay, and I do okay. There's my new column, and it has the day of the week. So let's save this. I say apply. It's just one of these days that when it's behaving slow. Normally, I haven't seen it be this slow, but yeah, some days it could be slow. Some days it works just perfectly fine. Probably I have some other things running on my system, which is probably slowing it down. Okay, so let me save my report. Okay, so once I save it, the Power Query editor should close, or if it not, we can close it. Okay, so all my fields are up here on the side panel. Let's look at the rental table where I added the return of the day week field is here. So now let's start with adding some visuals to my report. So I add a line chart. I can bring it in here, stretch it out. I want to see what my sales look like. So I select my amount based on the payment date. So if I open this payment date, what Power BI has automatically identified that it's a date dimension and it's created date hierarchy by itself. I didn't have to do this at all. So the date hierarchy has been created by Power BI itself. Okay. So this shows me a quick graph of how much amount on each year. And then since year is a hierarchical dimension, it'll give me these options to drill down. This is to enable the drill down. And then this is what will let me drill it down into the further more values. Okay, now let's add another visual. You can put a pie chart. So I like this other feature, like, it kind of gives you some guidelines, the red lines, if you see, as to how you're placing it, whether it's you're placed it centrally or if you want to have some symmetry, that's where it helps. Okay, so let's check how much amount earnings per store. So that shows my earnings per store, wherein store one is earning more than the other one. And another visual, let's add a bar chart. And then in this, let's choose one of our rental day of the week. And let's do a count of the rental ID. So just to see, okay. So there was some erroneous data where it wasn't able to get the day of the week. Let's see what is it doing over here. So it's trying to sum up the rental ID. That's not what we want. We want to do a count. Okay. So it shows different, so the bar chart comes up with different values for each day of the week. Okay. And we can change it also to whether we want to see an amount. Sorry, we can do the amount and rental to see the count and the dollars earned as well. We can do a combined bar chart. Okay, for some reason. Okay. And we can add a quick label on the top, a name for my report. Okay. And then if I want some filters, this filter panel is there. There's also one visual which lets you slice and dice your data. I can quickly add a slicer to my report. And let's say I want it by the rental date. I can use this rental date. I have an option to make it whether it's a drop down or before and after. I can do these kind of things. I can add a quick logo to my report. Yeah, so and that kind of gives you a quick start on your report. And let's see. Yeah, one other feature that I did want to mention is there are a couple of visuals which Microsoft keeps adding is some of these smart AI. Oh, let's see. Yeah, smart narrative. This was a recently added one. There are some AI features just like the key influencers. In this scenario, you don't even, it understands your data and gives some analytics based on that. So very quickly, let me just add a smart analytics. So it's creating a narrative. It is trying to understand what data I have. Really, I haven't created any visual at all. And based on that, yeah, so it has just done some analysis and it says where there was an increase between February and August 2005, right? So it shows that kind of information. And it's really done it based on just quickly analyzing all the data elements that I have without me really trying to figure it out. And that way, there are a few other visuals like key influencers. And same way, you can create inbuilt Python and R visuals as well. With Python, the thing to remember is there are some libraries which are supported on desktop. They may not be supported on Power BI service. So that's something you may have to look up. I think with that, we have come to a close of this session. So Kai, we are good to open for questions. I can start.
If anybody has any question, just open your microphone and ask, because you're all muted at the moment.
Akshata, great session.
Yeah, thank you, Nicola.
Congratulations, you did perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicola.